So when Heru comes of age, he wages a battle with his uncle to avenge his father's death. So the battle between Heru and his uncle Seth is documented in the Chesterberry Papyrus and also at the Books and Stones at Edfu Temple. In the battle, Heru defeats his uncle and restores the kingdom of his father, Asa. I'm sure the story sounds quite familiar. You know, the Lion King. Yeah. And so every pharaoh becomes known as the Heru king. You can see the pharaoh with the bird representing, the falcon representing Heru on his head. And so in the battle, at the end of the day, the farmer actually wins over the pastoral nomads, and the kingdoms now belong to the farmers. The kingdom is the kingdom of Asa. So you can imagine the Habiru living in the Nile Valley, read the story and think, what the hell? Two can play the game. And so the Habiru took the exact same story and just flipped it around. In the Habiru version of the story in the book of Genesis, the one who's jealous of his brother is the farmer. Cain, the farmer, is jealous of his brother, the shepherd, Abel. He kills him. But then they had to switch the story around a bit because if Cain kills Abel, then the kingdom of Adam or of pastoral nomads cannot continue because the lineage has been broken. And so the difference is they introduce a new son. Adam gives birth to a new son, and guess who that son's name is? Yes, his name is Seth, the exact same Seth who is the pastoral nomad brother of Asa. And so everybody that you read about in the Bible from Abraham to Jesus are literally descendants of Seth, which is the exact opposite in Kemet, where the kings become the descendants of Asa. And I'm sure religious fanatics might want to bring up the argument of what's older than what, but clearly the Kemet story is way older, 2,000 years older, at least 2,000 years older. We know this because the oldest biblical writings, which are the Dead Sea Scrolls, are dated to about 2,000 years ago. And the Bible also tells us so. And I'm going to show you. In the book of Genesis chapter 11, verse 27 to 28, the Bible says, now these are the generations of Terah. Terah beget Abram, and Nahor, and Haran beget Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in the Ur of the Chaldees. Now, the interesting historical part that I've underlined here is Ur of the Chaldeans. Ur became the Ur of the Chaldeans after the Chaldeans occupied Ur. And this did not happen before 1000 BC. And so we are not even talking about Abram. We're talking about his father was only born after 1000 BC. And at that time, ancient Kemet was already at the 21st dynasty, which is basically towards the end of the ancient Egyptian civilization. This is like over 2,000 years after the first dynasty. This is when Abraham is born. And you'll have to count the years from Abraham to Moses to determine when the 10 Commandments were given, which are actually written in the book of Deuteronomy. And these were not yet written when the children of Israel, even the book of Genesis was not yet written when the children of Israel lived in the so-called land of Egypt. And so the early Christians, the Coptic Christians, before they built their own churches, they actually used and abused ancient Egyptian temples. This is an example found at the Temple of Luxor, where Coptic Christians drew the figures of apostles on top of the ancient Egyptian inscription in the temples. And likewise in the exact same temple at Luxor, we have Muslims that built a mosque right inside the ancient Egyptian temple. And remember the Tekenu that I was talking about, which represents Asar's penis and therefore Asar's resurrection. I've circled it on the left, and on the right, you see the Islamic replica of the Tekenu. And I'm sure you'll see these similar phallic structures in cathedrals and churches, and even the Washington, D.C. monument is actually a replica of the Tekenu. So we've dealt with the part of which is older than what. And now to the final part where we explain the enslavement of the Habiru in the so-called land of Egypt. Now that we understand who the Habiru are and the historical context of the scriptures, we can now dive into the explanation of the enslavement of the Habiru by the ancient Egyptians. I submit to you that the allegory, the figurative meaning of the enslavement of pastoral nomads by farmers, is in the nature of the development of farmer technologies. For pastoral nomads have not changed or progressed in their way of life since the time of antiquity. They are shepherds, look after their cattle, they live in tents, as the Bible says that Jacob lived in tents. And cattle is one of their most important valuables. However, the farmer and his sons are not the same 2,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago, but they have evolved and have grown and have expanded and developed so much. And so when you live a culture of stagnation and you live right next to technologists and inventors, jealousy tends to naturally breed. This is why one of the 10 commandments in the Bible is that they should not covet the things of their neighbor. Because what happens when a pastoral nomad covets the things of the farmer? He will start abandoning his way of life and adopting the ways of the farmer. And this kills the pastoral nomadic culture. And so the Bible from the Old Testament to the New Testament is a story of how the Abiru lose their culture and slowly adopt the way of the farmers and settlers. They wander from place to place until they invade the land of Canaan and begin to settle. And for the first time, they own land. And guess what they were doing with that land? They were farming. So that is the first adoption. Then the next thing they adopted is kingship. In the book of 1 Samuel chapter number 8, the children of Israel are speaking to the prophet saying he is getting old, and they saying, give us a king to lead us. This displeased Samuel, so he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, listen to all the people, what the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, because pastoral nomads do not have kingships. So we can see how the culture of the farmer naturally enslaves and oppresses the culture of the pastoral nomad. And that is the actual metaphor of the enslavement of the Hebrews. Because living in tents is not as comfortable. Imagine you live in a tent next door and someone lives in a very comfortable house next door because they are a builder like Nimrod, they are a builder like Cain. Your wife and children, when it's raining and when it's cold, they might start murmuring, and that might oppress you as the man and the provider in the house. This is why pastoral nomadic groups that still exist today live very far from the city. They are able to preserve their pastoral nomadic culture because they are not oppressed by any presence of farmer technology developments around them. But all the pastoral nomads that have lived near farmer technologists, they have abandoned their pastoral nomadic life and adopted and settled, just as the allegory of the children of Israel have, from the Old Testament, moved from living in tents to living in cities with houses and buildings, which then forced them to adopt the farmer life and become farmers and have monuments and things like that. So this oppression and enslavement of the Habiru is a spiritual oppression and a spiritual enslavement. As we also know that the allegory begins with the Habiru moving into the land of Kemet. And the only reason they move there is because of a famine. They go there looking for bread, looking for refuge. So their culture forces them to become refugees and to be rescued by the farmers. And so having lived in Kemet, and according to the allegory, for all these years and centuries, or decades, beg your pardon, they were constantly enslaved by the culture that was around them. This is the simple meaning of the enslavement of the Habiru according to biblical allegory. For more information on this subject, there is no greater text that I've seen than this text over here. Sons of the Gods and the Daughters of Man, an Afro-Asiatic interpretation of Genesis 1 to 11 by Dr. Modupe Oduyoye. Coming out of Nigeria, he is a great linguist and a scholar. In the text, he actually compares biblical mythology to West African mythology, comparing the similarities and also the linguistic comparison between Hebrew and some of those West African languages, especially coming out of Nigeria. I was actually introduced to Dr. Modupe Oduyoye by Brother Asai Imhotep, and what you are looking at right now is a screenshot of the interview on Asai's YouTube channel. So you should definitely check it out. And in this specific interview, the subject was the Yoruba Hebrew Egyptian connection, and that is in terms of linguistics. So if you do not know about this channel, that's a great channel to follow. Subscribe to that channel. Most definitely. Brother Asai is also a linguist himself. Thank you for watching. Like the video, share with the world. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, press the subscribe button and press that notification button. Peace and African power.
Angakona umwana iyena tena libula bula inena yatinena pula pula wasiyita ngena. The champ is here and I to defend his title.